Elena Ramirez had always believed that grease and love smelled the same. Her father's hands were perpetually stained with motor oil, the black crescents under his fingernails a permanent badge of honor from Ramirez Auto Repair, the tiny two-bay shop on the edge of Willow Creek, Ohio, where the cornfields met cracked sidewalks and rusted pickups. Carlos Ramirez could fix anything with an engine: tractors that coughed like old men, muscle cars that teenage boys dreamed over. Even the ancient lawnmower Mrs. Henderson from church pushed 2 miles because she couldn't afford a new one. He never turned anyone away, even when they paid him in jars of homemade salsa or promises that stretched longer than their credit. Elena grew up on a stool beside him, passing wrenches before she could spell her own name, listening to him hum old Vicente Fernandez songs under his breath while he worked. He was her entire world, the man who carried her on his shoulders at the county fair, who made pancakes shaped like hearts every Sunday morning, who sat up all night when she had fever dreams, pressing cool cloths to her forehead and whispering, "Mi cielo, you're stronger than you know." Her mother had died in a car accident when Elena was 3, a drunk driver on an icy road, so it had always been just the two of them against everything. Carlos never dated, never complained, never let Elena feel like she was missing anything. "We have enough," he'd say, tapping her nose with a clean finger, the only part of his hands that ever truly washed free of oil. "Love is the only thing you can't buy more of." By the time Elena turned 28, the shop was barely scraping by. Big chain auto centers had sprung up on the highway, offering cheap oil changes and shiny waiting rooms with free coffee. Carlos refused to raise his prices, refused to cut corners. "Integrity doesn't have a discount," he'd grunt when Elena begged him to modernize. She had moved back home after college, mechanical engineering degree paid for by scholarships and her father's double shifts, to help run the books and drag the business into the 21st century. That's where she met Jake Harlan. Jake drove a gleaming black Ford Raptor that cost more than their house, wore boots that had never seen mud, and smiled like he knew exactly how good-looking he was. He brought his truck in for a routine check that turned into 3 hours of flirting while Elena rotated his tires. He was a real estate developer from Columbus, flipping farmland into subdivisions, turning corn into cul-de-sacs. He told her she had the prettiest eyes he'd ever seen on a girl with grease on her cheek. She laughed, embarrassed, but something fluttered in her chest she hadn't felt since high school. Jake courted her the way rich boys do: fancy dinners she couldn't pronounce, roses delivered to the shop, weekends in the city where he showed her penthouse views and champagne that tasted like stars. Carlos watched quietly, his dark eyes unreadable. "He's shiny, mija," he said once, "but shiny things sometimes scratch easy." Elena brushed it off. Jake made her feel seen, desired, like she was more than the girl in coveralls. When Jake proposed on a private rooftop in Cleveland, ring bigger than any tool in her father's box, she said yes before he finished the question. Carlos hugged her tight that night, longer than usual, and whispered, "I'm proud of you, always." But she caught him later in the shop, staring at the engagement photo on his phone, something sad in the set of his shoulders. 6 months before the wedding, everything changed. Carlos started losing weight fast, his skin turning sallow under the shop's fluorescent lights. He brushed off Elena's worry, too many late nights, too much coffee, but when he collapsed reaching for a socket wrench, the doctors found it. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. Aggressive. Maybe months. Elena's world tilted. She moved into the hospital with him, sleeping in chairs, holding his hand through chemo that didn't work, reading him the Spanish poetry he loved. Jake was supportive at first: flowers, texts, promises to handle wedding planning so she could focus. But as weeks turned to months, his visits grew shorter, his texts cooler. "Babe, I have a big investor dinner," he'd say when she begged him to come sit with her. "This deal could change everything for us." "Us," Elena noticed, started sounding more like him. Carlos noticed too. One night, when pain meds made him lucid and sharp, he gripped Elena's hand with surprising strength. "Listen to me, mi cielo. There's something you need to know. When I'm gone, go to the shop. Back corner, under the floorboards by the old compressor, there's a metal box. Wait until you're alone. Promise me. His eyes burned into hers. And Elena, don't trust anyone with it, not even the man you're going to marry. She tried to laugh it off, delirium, pain meds, but the fear in his voice chilled her. Papa, you're scaring me. Good, he rasped. Fear keeps us alive. Promise. She promised. 3 weeks later, Carlos died in the small hours of dawn. Elena curled in the bed beside him, her head on his chest, listening to his heart slow and stop. She screamed until nurses pulled her away, until her throat bled raw. The funeral was small. Townspeople, mechanics from neighboring shops, Mrs. Henderson crying into a handkerchief. Jake stood beside Elena in a black suit that cost more than Carlos made in a month, but he kept checking his Rolex, shifting weight like the cemetery dirt offended his Italian leather shoes. When the preacher finished, Jake leaned close. I have to head out soon, closing on the Miller Farm deal this afternoon. Elena stared at him, rain mixing with tears on her face. My father just went into the ground, Jake. I know, baby, and I'm sorry, but this is time-sensitive. Millions on the line for our future. Our future. The words tasted bitter. He kissed her cheek, quick, dry, and walked to his truck with phone already at his ear. Elena watched him go, something inside her cracking open. That night, alone in the house that smelled like her father's Old Spice and motor oil, Elena couldn't sleep. She drove to the darkened shop, used her key, flipped on the single bulb over the back bay. Kneeling on cold concrete, she pried up floorboards by the ancient compressor until she found it, a rusted metal lockbox, heavy. Hands shaking, she carried it to the workbench, used bolt cutters when the lock wouldn't budge. Inside were documents, flash drives, a letter in her father's neat handwriting. She read the letter first, tears blurring ink. Mi cielito, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're hurting worse than anything I can imagine. I'm so sorry I left you alone. But you're not alone. You're never poor, you're never powerless. I made sure. What I'm about to tell you will change everything. But remember, money is just metal and paper. What matters is who you are when no one's watching. Elena's breath caught as she read on. Carlos Ramirez wasn't born Carlos Ramirez. He was Carlos Esteban Reyes, only son of Antonio Reyes, founder of Reyes Energy Systems, the man who'd patented a revolutionary lithium solid battery in the 1980s that powered everything from early cell phones to military drones. Antonio had been ruthless, cutting Carlos out of the family when he refused to join the company, choosing instead to marry Elena's mother, a waitress from a poor village in Mexico who'd crossed the border with nothing but dreams. Carlos had walked away from billions to build a life on love. But he'd never stopped working. Quietly, anonymously, he'd continued innovating in that little shop, tinkering nights after Elena slept, patenting improvements under shell companies, licensing tech to giants like Tesla and Samsung. The money had grown, managed by a discreet attorney in Chicago, hidden behind layers of trusts. Current value? $4.1 billion, all in Elena's name, transferred into an irrevocable trust the week Carlos collapsed, after Jake had visited the hospital alone, complaining about medical bills, about wedding costs, about how Elena's grief was holding them back. Carlos had heard every word. He'd called his lawyer from the hospital bed and made the trust bulletproof. No spouse, no ex-spouse, no one but Elena and her future children could ever touch it. The letter ended. Jake is going to leave you, baby girl. I see it coming like storm clouds. He's going to think you're nothing without him, that he's trading up. Let him go. Let him think he won, because when you rise, and you will, he'll spend the rest of his life choking on what he lost, not because you punish him, but because you become everything he could never deserve. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Trust the plan, Papa. Elena sat on the concrete until dawn, documents spread around her like fallen leaves, sobbing and laughing and raging all at once. Her father, her humble, ramen-eating, double-shift working father, had been secretly one of the richest men in America, and he'd protected her even from the grave. The next morning, Jake called. "We need to talk, in person. It's important." Elena's voice was steady. "Come to the house." He arrived in pressed khakis, looking rested, cologne sharp, sat at the kitchen table where Carlos used to help her with homework. "Elena, this isn't working." Just like that. No softness. "You've been distant, consumed by your dad's stuff. I get it, grief is hard, but I can't build the life I want tied to this." He gestured around the modest kitchen. "This town, this shop. I need more." Elena stared at him. More than what? More than struggling, more than coveralls and cornfields. "I met someone, Elena, at the country club. Her name's Brooke. Her dad owns half the commercial real estate in Columbus. She gets my vision." The affair had been going on for months. Business dinners that weren't business, late nights that were never at the office. Brooke, with her highlighted hair and influencer smile, posting photos of brunches Elena could never attend because she was at the hospital. Jake had already talked to a lawyer. The papers were ready. He was being generous. She could keep the house, the shop. He'd pay minimal support if she fought for it. "Sign these and we can both move on clean." Elena took the papers, hands steady now. "You really think I'm nothing without you?" Jake sighed, pity in his eyes. "You're a good person, Elena. Sweet. But let's be real. You're a small-town mechanic's daughter. Brooke's playing in a different league." He stood. "I'll grab my stuff this weekend." The door closed behind him with soft finality. Elena waited until his truck disappeared down the road. Then she picked up her phone, called the number on the letterhead, Marcus Whitmore, attorney at law, Chicago. "This is Elena Reyes," she said, voice clear for the first time in months. "My father said you'd be expecting my call." Jake married Brooke 3 months later in a lavish ceremony at a vineyard, social media exploding with photos of fairy lights and designer gowns. Elena sent a simple card, "Wishing you both every happiness you deserve." The irony wasn't lost on her. Meanwhile, she met with Marcus in a sleek Chicago office, learned the scope of her new reality. Controlling shares in green energy startups, royalties pouring in from patents still in use worldwide, real estate holdings, liquid assets, all protected, all hers. She sold the little shop, not because she wanted to, but because holding on to it felt like clinging to grief. Used part of the proceeds to establish the Carlos Reyes Foundation, scholarships for first-generation college students in trade skills, grants for single mothers starting businesses, free auto repair clinics in underserved communities. She moved slowly at first, learning the ropes with Marcus and a team of advisors her father had handpicked. Pregnant, she discovered it the week Carlos died, too numb to tell anyone, Elena poured herself into preparing for her daughter. She named her Isabella, after her grandmother. The foundation's first major event was a gala in Columbus, announcing a $200 million endowment for women's vocational training. Invitations went to carefully selected guests, including Brooke Harlan, whose social media influence could amplify the cause, and her new husband, whose real estate connections might prove useful for community centers. They RSVP'd immediately. Brooke saw dollar signs and networking. Jake saw a chance to feel importance again. The night of the gala, Elena arrived in a deep emerald gown that hugged her post-pregnancy curves, Reyes family emeralds at her throat, pieces her father had bought anonymously decades ago. She looked like old money because she was old money, reborn. The venue was breathtaking, crystal chandeliers, string quartet, the scent of orchids heavy in the air. Elena stood on stage, Isabella asleep upstairs with a nanny, and told her story. Not all of it, just enough. 6 months ago, I buried my father, a small-town mechanic who taught me everything about integrity and hard work. That same week, my fiancé left me, telling me I would never be enough for the life he wanted. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed. He married someone else, thinking he'd found a better future. But my father left me more than memories. He left me the means to build something bigger than revenge, to help women who've been told they're not enough become everything they were meant to be. She announced the endowment, the programs, the partnerships. The room erupted. In the back, Jake stood frozen, face ash gray. Brooke clutched his arm, nails digging in, eyes wide with calculation and dawning horror. Elena met Jake's gaze across the crowd, calm, unflinching. Not triumph, not hatred, just certainty. Later, in the underground garage, Brooke's composure shattered. "You idiot," she hissed, voice echoing off concrete. "You left her for me? She's worth billions. Billions, Jake. Her father invented the batteries in every electric car on the road, and you thought she was poor white trash in coveralls." Jake stammered, I didn't know." "Of course you didn't know, because you never saw her. You saw what you thought was weakness and ran to what you thought was strength. My father's going to drop you from every deal in the state when he hears about this. We're ruined." She yanked off her ring, flawless 5-carat diamond, and threw it at his chest. "I can't be the punchline in the story where the wife wins everything." Her heels clicked away into the dark. Jake stood alone under flickering fluorescent lights, the weight of his choices crushing down like the concrete above him. Upstairs, Elena accepted congratulations, promises of support, genuine admiration. A woman approached, older, elegant. "Your father licensed his first patent through my husband's firm in '89. He was the kindest man we ever worked with. Always anonymous donations to children's hospitals. We wondered who he'd left it all to." She smiled through tears. He chose well. Elena felt her father's presence like a hand on her shoulder. Years later, Isabella, bright, fearless, with her grandfather's dark eyes, started kindergarten. Elena dropped her off in a sensible SUV, no longer hiding. Jake sometimes attended school events, allowed supervised time because Elena believed children deserved fathers, even flawed ones. He watched Isabella run to Elena, watched the way people gravitated to her quiet power, watched the life he'd thrown away flourish without him. He never asked for another chance. He knew he didn't deserve one. Elena built the foundation into a powerhouse. Thousands of women trained, businesses launched, lives changed. She dated sparingly, men who saw her, not her money. She taught Isabella to change her own oil before she let her near a trust fund statement. And every year, on the anniversary of Carlos's death, Elena drove back to Willow Creek, sat on the stool in the empty bay where the shop used to be, now a community training center bearing his name, and talked to her father aloud. "Papa, you were right about everything. The people who leave do us the biggest favor. They make room for who we're really meant to be." The wind carried old Vicente Fernandez songs through the open doors, and Elena smiled, grease under her fingernails by choice now, heart full of the only wealth that mattered, love that outlasted everything else. Because, in the end, Carlos Reyes hadn't just left his daughter billions, he'd left her the knowledge that true power doesn't announce itself with diamonds or deals. It lives quietly in the choices you make when no one's watching, in the love you give without expecting return, in the strength to rise, not to destroy those who hurt you, but to build something so beautiful they spend forever regretting they weren't part of it. And Elena Ramirez Reyes lived that truth every single day. 5 years passed in the blink of an oil change, yet sometimes it felt like a lifetime compressed into a single heartbeat. Isabella Reyes, Bella to everyone who loved her, turned 6 in the spring, all wild curls and fearless questions, the spitting image of her grandfather with Elena's stubborn chin. She could already strip a spark plug faster than most adults could find one, loved nothing more than helping in the community training center that now occupied the old shop bays, and possessed a laugh that made even the grumpiest old farmers soften. Elena watched her daughter grow with a fierce, quiet pride that ached in the best way, the kind of ache that reminded you your heart was still working after everything. The Carlos Reyes Foundation had exploded beyond anyone's expectations. What started as a $200 million endowment grew into a $1.2 billion powerhouse. Fueled by strategic investments, Elena learned to navigate with the same precision her father had used on engines. They funded trade schools across the Midwest, paid rent for single mothers escaping abuse, launched mobile repair clinics that rolled into rural towns like modern-day Knights, fixing cars for free so women could get to work, to interviews, to new lives. Elena's face appeared on Forbes lists, the quiet billionaire changing blue-collar America. But she still wore jeans and boots to every meeting, still got grease under her nails because she taught the advanced diagnostics classes herself twice a month. The money never changed who she was. It only amplified what her father had always known she could be. Jake Carlin's life, on the other hand, unraveled thread by thread until the whole fabric tore. Brooke divorced him 18 months after the gala, taking half of what little he'd managed to keep and all of his pride. Her father's real estate empire quietly blackballed him from every major deal in Ohio. Whispers of the guy who left a billionaire mechanic for an influencer followed him like exhaust fumes. His development firm folded under debt. The Raptor got repossessed, and he ended up selling commercial properties for a mid-tier agency in Dayton. Decent money, but nothing like the empire he dreamed of. He saw Elena occasionally at Bella's school events, always from a distance, always with that hollow look of a man staring at a road he deliberately took the wrong exit from. He never begged for forgiveness. Some part of him knew it wasn't his to ask for. Elena never offered it either, not out of bitterness, but because forgiveness had already happened the moment she chose to build instead of burn. One crisp October afternoon in 2030, Elena's phone buzzed with a number she hadn't seen in years. Jake. She almost let it go to voicemail, but something, curiosity, maybe the same instinct that made her father listen to every customer's story, made her answer. Elena. His voice was rougher, older. I know I have no right to call, but Bella's school play is tonight. She's the narrator. I just wanted to make sure you knew I'd be there, in the back. I won't cause any scene. Elena closed her eyes, saw her daughter's excited face that morning, practicing lines in the kitchen. I know you'll be there, Jake. You always are. A long pause. She's incredible, Elena. Smart as hell. Kind. She gets that from you. And from him. Him. Carlos. Jake had never said her father's name before, not once. Thank you for letting me be part of her life, even just this much. She's your daughter too, Elena said simply. Biology matters, but so does showing up. You've been doing that. Another silence, heavy with everything unsaid. I saw the new center in Willow Creek, the one with the mural of your dad on the wall. I drove by last week. Elena's throat tightened. The mural was massive. Carlos under the hood of an old Chevy, smiling that quiet smile. The words, "Integrity doesn't have a discount," painted beneath. I sat in the parking lot for an hour, just looking at it, thinking about how wrong I was, about everything. Elena waited. She didn't fill the silence with comfort he hadn't earned. I used to think success was big houses and big deals, but watching what you've built, helping all those women, raising Bella like he raised you, I get it now. I lost the best thing that ever happened to me because I was too stupid to see what was right in front of me. The confession hung between them like exhaust on a cold morning. Elena felt no triumph, no satisfaction, just a sad certainty, the same one her father had carried. Jake, Elena said gently, the thing about choices is they teach us who we are. You made yours, I made mine, and Bella gets to grow up knowing what real love looks like because we both learned the hard way what it doesn't. He exhaled shakily. Yeah, I just needed you to know, I know, that I'm sorry, not for another chance, I know that's gone forever, but sorry for the hurt I caused you when you were already carrying the world. Elena looked out her office window at the training center below, young women in coveralls laughing as they rebuilt an engine, lives remade one bolt at a time. I forgave you a long time ago, Jake, not for you, for me, so I could build this without carrying your weight too. Thank you, he whispered, for that, for her, for everything. The call ended. Elena sat still for a long moment, then walked downstairs to teach her class. That night, the elementary school auditorium was packed for the first grade production of The Little Engine That Could. Bella stood center stage in a conductor's hat 2 sizes too big, voice clear and strong as she narrated the tiny engine's journey over the mountain. Elena sat in the front row, phone recording, heart swelling. In the back row, Jake watched too, eyes shining suspiciously in the dim light. When the play ended and the kids took their bows, Bella's gaze found Elena first, then scanned until she spotted Jake. She waved wildly at both of them, grins splitting her face. Two parents, separate rows, separate lives, united in that moment by the fierce little girl who'd inherited the best parts of both worlds, and the unbreakable strength of her grandfather she'd never met but somehow knew by heart. After the show, backstage chaos of hugs and flowers, Jake approached slowly. Bella launched herself at him first, chattering about her lines. He lifted her easily, same as he always did, murmuring praise. Then he set her down and looked at Elena. "She's perfect," he said quietly. "She is," Elena agreed. Bella tugged both their hands. "Picture." Mrs. Thompson said family picture. For a second, Elena hesitated. Then she nodded. The three of them stood together, Elena in the middle, Bella between them, Jake's hand careful not to brush hers. The photo captured something complicated and healed all at once. Two people who once promised forever and broke it, now bound by something stronger than romance. Co-parenting, respect, the shared knowledge that some mistakes can't be undone, but their consequences can be transformed into something meaningful. The next spring, on the 7th anniversary of Carlos's death, Elena took Bella to the cemetery for the first time. They brought yellow roses, his favorite, and a small toy wrench set Bella insisted Abuelo would want. They sat on the grass by the headstone. Carlos Esteban Reyes, beloved father, forever fixing hearts. Bella traced the letters with sticky fingers. "Mommy, why did Abuelo hide all the money?" Elena smiled softly. "Because he wanted me to know people would love me for me, not for what I had. And because he knew that real wealth isn't money. It's the kind of love that stays, even when everything else falls apart." Bella nodded solemnly, wise beyond her years. "Like how you love me even when I spill juice on the couch?" "Exactly like that, mija." They sat in comfortable silence until Bella spoke again. "Do you think Abuelo can see us?" Elena looked at the sky, felt the familiar warmth in her chest. "I know he can, and I bet he's proud." That night, after Bella was asleep, Elena went to the training center alone. She walked the bays where her father had once worked, now filled with toolboxes bearing women's names, success stories taped to the walls. She stopped at the mural, touched Carlos's painted face. "You were right about everything, Papa," she whispered. "About Jake, about the money, about trusting the plan, but mostly about love being the only thing you can't buy more of." A breeze moved through the open doors, carrying the faint scent of motor oil and Old Spice. Elena smiled through tears that weren't sad anymore. The people who leave do us the biggest favor. They clear space for who we're meant to become. Carlos had known that, lived it, taught it without ever saying the words directly. And now Elena lived it too, not as a victim who rose from ashes, but as a woman who'd learned that true power isn't in billions or revenge, it's in choosing every single day to build something beautiful from whatever life hands you, even from heartbreak, especially from heartbreak. Outside, the stars burned bright over Willow Creek, Ohio, same as they had the night Carlos took his last breath, same as they would forever. And somewhere in that vast light, a humble mechanic turned secret billionaire watched his daughter and granddaughter carry his legacy forward, not in boardrooms or bank accounts, but in lives changed, in love given freely, in the quiet certainty that character is the only treasure that truly lasts. Elena locked up the center, set the alarm, and drove home to the house she'd built on land her father once dreamed of owning. She tucked Bella in, kissed her forehead, whispered the same words Carlos had whispered to her every night. "You are brilliant. You are worthy. You are loved beyond measure." Then she stood on the porch, breathing in the cool night air, grease still under her fingernails by choice, heart full of the man who'd taught her that sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money at all. It's knowing, deep in your bones, that you are never alone, you are never poor, you are never powerless, because someone, somewhere, loved you enough to make sure of it, even from the grave. And that's the real story. Not the billions, not the betrayal, not even the sweet justice of watching those who underestimated you choke on their regret. The real story is love, the kind that protects, the kind that provides, the kind that outlasts everything else, just like Carlos promised it would. 10 years after the gala that changed everything, Elena Reyes stood on the stage of the Ohio State Theater in Columbus, Ohio. Spotlights warm on her face, the auditorium packed with over 2,000 people. She was 40 now, strands of silver threading through her dark hair like highlights she'd never paid for. Lines at her eyes earned from laughter and long nights and the kind of living that leaves marks worth keeping. The Carlos Reyes Foundation was celebrating its 10th anniversary, and the event wasn't a gala this time. It was a full-blown summit. Keynote speakers, panel discussions, live demonstrations from graduates who'd gone on to own garages, engineering firms, renewable energy startups. The theme was simple, painted in massive letters across the backdrop. Integrity doesn't have a discount. Bella, now 16, stood backstage in coveralls with the foundation logo embroidered over the heart, ready to introduce her mother. She'd grown into a force, tall like her grandfather, fearless behind the wheel of anything with an engine, already accepted early decision to MIT for mechanical engineering with a full ride from the foundation her mother had built. She still spent summers in Willow Creek teaching kids how to change oil, still kept a photo of Abuelo Carmos on her dashboard, still rolled her eyes when people called her the billionaire's daughter, because she knew the real inheritance wasn't money. Elena's speech that night wasn't about triumph or karma, it was about continuation. "I was 28, she began, voice steady, carrying to the back row without a microphone, because she'd learned how to project from years of talking over running engines. When I buried my father in a cemetery most of you drive past without noticing. The same week, the man I was supposed to marry told me I wasn't enough for the life he wanted. He left me pregnant, grieving, and, on paper, broke. What he didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that my father, Carlos Esteban Reyes, the small-town mechanic who smelled like motor oil and Old Spice, had quietly built one of the largest personal fortunes in clean energy patents this country has ever seen. He hid it, not because he was ashamed of it, but because he wanted to raise a daughter who would be loved for who she was, not what she had. And when he saw from a hospital bed that the man I loved was going to abandon me at my lowest, he did what any good father would do. He protected me one last time. He put every penny into a trust no one could ever touch but me and the children I might have. Then he died, leaving me a letter that said, 'Trust the plan.'" The audience was silent, hanging on every word. I could have used that money to destroy the people who hurt me. I could have bought billboards, hired lawyers, made sure they never worked again. But my father didn't raise me for revenge. He raised me for repair. So I took the broken pieces of my heart, of my trust, of the little shop where I grew up, and I rebuilt them into something that could fix other people's broken pieces too. Tonight, 10 years later, this foundation has trained over 42,000 women in skilled trades. We've funded 8,300 small businesses started by single mothers. We've kept 19,000 families in their homes when one repair bill would have evicted them. And every single one of those lives touched started with a man who believed love was worth more than luxury, and that character is the only currency that never loses value. She paused, eyes scanning the crowd, landing briefly on the third row where Jake sat, older now, hair thinning, suit nice but not flashy, eyes downcast. He'd come alone. He always did now. "I won't pretend it was easy," Elena continued. "There were nights I sat in the dark wondering why the people who were supposed to love me most could leave so easily. There were mornings I had to force myself out of bed for a baby who needed me when I barely had strength for myself. But grief, betrayal, abandonment, they don't get the final word unless you give it to them. My father taught me that the people who walk away aren't punishing you, they're revealing you. They're making room for the version of your life that was always meant to exist. Sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is showing you exactly who they are, so you can stop wasting time trying to make them someone else. Bella stepped onto the stage then, hugging her mother fiercely before taking the microphone. "My mom doesn't talk about this much," Bella said, voice clear and strong. "But I grew up knowing my dad left before I was born. I used to be angry about it. Then I got old enough to understand what he walked away from, not just money, but a woman who would have loved him anyway, who would have built a life with him anyway. And I realized I didn't need to be angry, I just needed to be grateful. Because if he'd stayed, maybe Mom wouldn't have built all this. Maybe I wouldn't have grown up surrounded by women who fix things instead of waiting for someone else to. Maybe I wouldn't know every single day what real strength looks like. So thank you to the man who left. You did us the biggest favor of our lives." The applause was thunderous, standing ovation rolling through the theater like an engine finally catching after a cold start. Later, at the reception in the grand lobby, people lined up to meet Elena, to thank her, to share their own stories. Jake waited until the crowd thinned, approaching slowly, hands in his pockets. "Elena," he said quietly, I don't have words." She nodded. No anger left, no bitterness, just the calm of someone who'd long ago stopped carrying his choices. "Bella's speech," he went on, voice thick, "she's incredible. You've done an unbelievable job." "We both did," Elena corrected gently. "You show up for her. That matters." He swallowed hard. "I saw the new patent last month, the solid-state battery improvement licensed to 3 major automakers. They're calling it the Reyes-Hernandez advancement." He managed a small smile. "You co-credited one of the graduates from the program." Elena shrugged. She earned it, fixed a flaw I'd been staring at for years. Jake looked down. "I think about that night in the garage sometimes. Brooke screaming, me realizing I'd thrown away the best thing I'd ever have. I used to think it was the worst moment of my life. Now I know it was the most honest. The universe handed me a mirror, and I finally saw what an idiot I was." Elena studied him for a long moment. "And now?" "Now I try to be better. I mentor kids at the community center in Dayton. I donate anonymously, nothing like what you do, but what I can. I just wanted you to know I learned the lesson, even if it cost me everything to learn it." She reached out, touched his arm briefly, the first voluntary contact in over a decade. "The lesson wasn't for you to suffer, Jake. It was for you to grow. I hope you're doing that." "I am," he said, eyes wet. "And Elena, thank you for not becoming what I deserved, for becoming what the world needed instead." He walked away then, disappearing into the crowd, lighter somehow, like a weight he'd carried alone for 10 years had finally been shared. Bella found her mother on the balcony overlooking the city lights. "You okay, Mom?" Elena pulled her daughter close. "More than okay, mija. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." They stood there together, 2 generations of Reyes women, watching Columbus sparkle below them. Inside, the summit continued. Women laughing, connecting, planning, building. Outside, the night air carried the faint, comforting scent of possibility. And somewhere, in whatever place good fathers go when they leave this one, Carlos Esteban Reyes smiled the quiet smile he'd always saved just for his daughter. He'd known the plan would work, not because of the money he'd hidden, not because of the trust he'd built, but because he'd raised a daughter who understood that true wealth isn't what you have, it's what you do with what you're given, even when what you're given is heartbreak. Especially then, because the people who leave you, the ones who underestimate you, the ones who think you're nothing without them, they're not the end of your story. They're just a chapter that makes room for the empire you were always meant to build. And Elena Reyes built hers, one repaired life at a time, with grease under her nails, love in her heart, and her father's voice in her ear whispering the truth he'd lived every day. You are never alone. You are never poor. You are never powerless. I made sure of that." The end. Or really, just the beginning. 15 years after the night her world shattered in a hospital room and rebuilt itself in a dusty auto shop, down to the creaky radio playing Vicente Fernandez, Elena Reyes sat alone on the porch of her house her father had always dreamed of owning, a sprawling but unpretentious ranch on the outskirts of Willow Creek, surrounded by fields that turned gold in autumn and white in winter. She was 43 now, the silver in her hair no longer strands, but a crown she wore without apology, her hands still calloused from turning wrenches alongside the women she mentored, her eyes carrying the calm depth of someone who had survived the worst and chosen to make it mean something. The Carlos Reyes Foundation had become a global force. $8.4 billion in assets, programs in 37 countries, partnerships with governments and corporations that once would have dismissed a mechanic's daughter out of hand. They'd revolutionized vocational training for women, pioneered microgrid solar systems for rural communities using updated versions of her father's original patents, and quietly paid off medical debt for thousands of families facing the same cancer that stole Carlos. Forbes no longer called her the quiet billionaire. They called her the most impactful philanthropist of the decade. But Elena still answered to Miss Elena from the teenagers in coveralls, who saw her as proof that their dreams weren't too big. Bella was 21, home from MIT for winter break, asleep inside after a late-night engine rebuild with her mom in the detached garage that replicated the old shop down to the creaky radio playing Vicente Fernandez. She just published her first paper, a breakthrough in battery thermal management that built directly on her grandfather's work, and turned down 7-figure offers from tech giants because she wanted to finish her degree and launch her own company focused on affordable electric conversion kits for older vehicles, making green tech accessible to people who couldn't afford new cars. Elena had never been more proud. The night air was crisp, stars sharp overhead the way they only get in small towns far from city lights, and Elena held a chipped coffee mug that had once been her father's, the one with the faded "World's Best Dad" logo he'd laughed at every morning. She came out here every year on this date, the anniversary of the day she found the lockbox, the day everything changed, and talked to him aloud. No shame in it, no fear of being overheard. "Hey, Papa," she said softly, voice carrying into the dark. 15 years today since I opened that box and realized you'd been protecting me my whole life. I still can't believe you carried all of that alone, just to make sure I grew up knowing what real love felt like." A breeze moved through the trees, rustling leaves like an answer. "Bella's home. You'd love her fire, the way she argues with me about torque specs and then hugs me like I hung the moon. She asked me last week why you never told me about the money sooner. I told her what you wrote, that you wanted me to marry someone who loved me, not my bank account. She laughed and said, 'Well, it worked. Mom never married anybody.' And I realized she's right. I never needed to. You gave me enough love for 10 lifetimes." Elena's eyes glistened, but the tears were gentle now, the kind that come from fullness rather than loss. Inside, she heard the soft creak of the screen door. Bella padded in socks and an oversized foundation hoodie, hair wild from sleep, carrying a blanket. Without a word, she draped it over her mother's shoulders and sat beside her, curling into the familiar spot like she was 6 again instead of 21. They sat in silence for a long minute, breathing together. "You're talking to Abuelo," Bella said finally, not a question. "Every year," Elena confirmed. "Tell him hi from me." "I already did. Told him you're kicking ass at MIT and making him proud." Bella smiled in the dark. "He knows, Mom. I feel him every time I'm under a hood, like he's looking over my shoulder, making sure I don't cross-thread a bolt." Elena laughed quietly, the sound warm and real. "He'd love that you notice." Another pause. Bella's voice turned serious. "I saw Dad today. He stopped by the training center to drop off donations, tools from his company's warehouse. He asked about you." Elena nodded. Jake had rebuilt a modest life, steady job, remarried quietly to a teacher who adored Bella, no flash or pretense left in him. He and Elena had reached a place of genuine co-parenting peace, occasional coffee to discuss Bella's future, mutual respect forged from years of showing up. "He looks good," Bella continued, "happy even. He told me again how sorry he is. Not in a begging way, just acknowledging. I told him I forgave him a long time ago, that holding on to anger would be a waste of the life you and Abuelo gave me." Elena turned to look at her daughter, this brilliant, compassionate young woman who'd grown up surrounded by love instead of resentment. "You're wiser than I was at your age. I had a good teacher." They sat longer, watching shooting stars streak across the sky. Bella spoke again, voice barely above a whisper. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if he'd stayed? If Abuelo hadn't hidden the money and Jake had known?" Elena considered it, really considered it for the first time in years. "I used to," she admitted. "In the beginning, when the hurt was fresh, I wondered if knowing about the money would have made him stay. But now, I think it wouldn't have mattered, because the problem wasn't the money, it was who he was back then. A man who could leave a grieving pregnant woman because she didn't fit his vision of success wasn't ready for the life we could have built, billions or no billions. And honestly, mija, I'm grateful every day that I didn't have to find out the hard way if he'd only stayed for the fortune. Your abuelo made sure I never had to question whether I was loved for me." Bella leaned her head on Elena's shoulder. "He was smart, the smartest." Dawn was starting to bruise the horizon purple when Bella spoke one last time. "I'm glad the story ended this way, not with revenge or drama or any of that, just with us, building things, fixing things, helping people, living the way he taught you to." Elena kissed the top of her daughter's head. "It's not the end, baby girl. It's just the part where we keep going, where we keep proving that love and integrity outlast everything else." They stayed on the porch until the sun rose fully, painting the fields gold, warming the air with the promise of another day. Inside, the house smelled like coffee and possibility, and somewhere, in the quiet certainty that exists beyond grief and time, Carlos Esteban Reyes watched the two women he'd loved most in the world carry his legacy forward, not in boardrooms or bank statements, but in the lives they touched, the love they gave without condition, the unwavering belief that character is the only inheritance that truly matters. Elena stood eventually, stretching, ready to start the day teaching a new class of women how to rebuild an engine, and, by extension, how to rebuild themselves. Bella followed, already planning improvements to the conversion kit prototype waiting in the garage. And as they walked inside together, mother and daughter, grease under their nails and light in their hearts, the truth settled deeper than ever. The people who leave you, who betray you, who underestimate you, they don't break your story, they reveal it. They make room for the magnificent life you were always meant to live. Carlos had known that. He'd lived it every day he chose love over luxury, every night he worked double shifts so his daughter could have dance lessons, every moment he kept his fortune hidden to protect her heart. And now, 15 years after the darkest week of her life, Elena Reyes lived it too, not as a billionaire, not as a philanthropist, not even as a survivor, but as a daughter who finally understood the full depth of her father's love, a love so fierce it reached beyond the grave to make sure she would never be alone, never poor, never powerless. A love that turned heartbreak into legacy, a love that lasted forever, and that, in the end, was the real fortune, the one no one could ever take away. 20 years after Elena Reyes found the rusted lockbox that rewrote her life, she stood in the middle of a bustling training center in Detroit, the largest the Carlos Reyes Foundation had ever built. At 48, Elena was a force of nature, hair fully silver now, pulled back in a practical braid, her coveralls worn soft from years of teaching, her presence commanding without effort. The center was a masterpiece of function and purpose, 10 bays equipped with state-of-the-art diagnostic tools, classrooms for everything from welding to robotics, a rooftop solar array powering it all, designed by Bella and her team of MIT-trained engineers. The foundation's reach was staggering, $12.7 billion in assets, programs in 62 countries, over 150,000 women trained in skilled trades, countless lives transformed through housing grants, medical debt relief, and micro-business loans. Elena's name was synonymous with impact. Time had named her Person of the Year twice, but she still drove a beat-up pickup to work and ate lunch with her students, swapping stories about busted transmissions and second chances. Bella, now 26, ran Reyes Innovations, the company she'd founded to bring affordable electric vehicle conversion kits to rural and low-income communities. Her kits were a global phenomenon, installed in everything from old farm trucks to city taxis, cutting emissions and costs while proving green tech didn't have to be elitist. She'd inherited her grandfather's knack for quiet genius and her mother's fire for justice, and at 26, she was already being courted by world leaders to advise on sustainable infrastructure. But to Elena, she was still the girl who'd once snuck a wrench into bed like a teddy bear, who called her mom with a grin that could melt steel. It was October again, the air sharp with the promise of frost, and Elena was in Detroit for the center's grand opening. The event was massive: politicians, CEOs, community leaders, and hundreds of women who'd graduated from foundation programs, some now running their own shops or teaching classes of their own. Bella stood beside her mother on the main stage, introducing a new scholarship fund named for Carlos, her voice carrying the same steady strength Elena had always leaned on. My grandfather never wanted to be famous. He wanted to be useful. He spent his life fixing things, cars, dreams, futures, because he believed that integrity is the only thing that holds when everything else falls apart. This fund will send 10,000 women to trade schools over the next decade, because that's what he would have done with every penny he had. The crowd roared, but Elena's gaze drifted to the back of the room where Jake Harlan stood, 50 now, leaner than he'd been, hair gone gray, wearing a simple jacket instead of the tailored suits he'd once favored. He'd moved to Detroit 3 years ago, taken a job managing a nonprofit that refurbished cars for low-income families, work that suited him better than real estate ever had. He and his wife Sarah had a quiet life. Sarah taught 3rd grade, and they fostered teenagers, giving them stability Jake had spent years learning the value of. He was a good father to Bella, never missing a birthday or graduation, always respecting the boundaries Elena had set. Their co-parenting had evolved into something like friendship, not close, but real, built on shared love for their daughter and mutual acknowledgement of past mistakes. As Bella spoke, Jake caught Elena's eye and offered a small nod, a gesture heavy with history. Elena returned it, no longer carrying the weight of what he'd done, but grateful for the man he'd tried to become. After the speeches, the crowd spilled into the center's main bay for a ribbon cutting and live demonstrations, women welding, programming EVs, rebuilding engines with the confidence of those who'd been told they could do anything and believed it. Elena moved through the chaos, shaking hands, hugging graduates, listening to stories of rebuilt lives. One woman, a former nurse who'd lost everything to medical bills, pressed a folded letter in Elena's hand. "Your program gave me a second shot," she whispered, eyes wet. "I own my own shop now. My kids are in college. Thank you for seeing us." Elena tucked the letter into her pocket, adding it to the collection she kept in a box at home, each one a testament to her father's vision. Later, as the event wound down, Jake approached, Sarah at his side, her kind face lit with genuine warmth. "Elena," Jake said, voice low but steady, "this place, it's incredible. What you've built, I don't have words." Sarah nodded. "I've been volunteering at one of your mobile clinics. The women you're helping, they talk about you like your family." Elena smiled, softer than she once might have. "It's not me, it's them, and it's him." She glanced at the mural of Carlos on the far wall, his face painted mid-laugh, a wrench in one hand, the words "Fix what matters" curving beneath. Jake followed her gaze. "I think about him a lot," he admitted, "the way he looked at me that last time in the hospital, like he already knew what I was going to do. I didn't understand it then, but I do now. He wasn't protecting the money. He was protecting you from someone who didn't deserve you." Elena nodded, unsurprised by the confession. "He saw people for who they were, not who they pretended to be. That was his gift." Sarah touched Jake's arm, a quiet signal, and he cleared his throat. "We won't keep you. Just wanted to say, Bella's speech, the center, all of it. It's proof you did everything he hoped you would. And more." They turned to leave, but Elena called after them. "Jake." He looked back. "You're doing good work with the car program. Bella told me you helped a single mom last week, got her a minivan so she could keep her job. That's the kind of thing he'd have noticed." Jake's face softened, a crack in the armor he'd worn for years. "Trying to make up for lost time," he said simply. "Not with you or Bella, just with myself." Elena watched them go, feeling the familiar weight of her father's love settle around her like a well-worn jacket. Bella found her a moment later, grease smudged on her cheek from helping a student with a tricky alternator. "You good, Mom?" she asked, reading Elena's face with the intuition only a daughter could. "Better than good," Elena said, pulling her into a quick hug. "You killed it up there." "Learned from the best," Bella grinned, then lowered her voice. "I saw you talking to Dad. Everything okay?" "Everything's fine. He's proud of you. So Sarah." Bella nodded, her expression thoughtful. "He's different now, like he finally figured out what matters. Took him long enough." Elena chuckled. "Sometimes it takes losing everything to learn what you should have held on to." That night, after the crowds had gone and the center was quiet, Elena and Bella stayed late, working side by side in the main bay on a 1987 Chevy pickup a student had donated for practice. The radio played softly, old rancheras Carlos had loved, and the air smelled of oil and metal and memory. They didn't talk much, just passed tools and traded grins, the rhythm of their work a conversation all its own. When the truck's engine finally roared to life, Bella whooped, high-fiving her mother with greasy hands. "Abuelo would have loved this," she said, eyes bright. "He's here," Elena replied, touching the mural with her fingertips. "Always is." They cleaned up, locked the center, and drove back to Willow Creek under a sky heavy with stars. At home, Bella crashed hard, exhausted from the day, but Elena couldn't sleep. She went to the garage, pulled out the lockbox she'd kept all these years, and opened it for the first time in a decade. The letter was still there, her father's handwriting faded but legible, the words burned into her soul. "Mi cielito, you're never alone, you're never poor, you're never powerless. I made sure." She read it slowly, tears falling freely now, not from grief, but from gratitude so deep it felt like prayer. "You did more than make sure, Papa. You made me." The next morning, Elena woke to a text from an unknown number. It was Brooke, the third message in 15 years, sent from a new life in Colorado, where she ran a small yoga studio and posted sparingly online. "I watched the Detroit opening livestream. You and Bella are unstoppable. I used to think I'd won something back then, taking Jake, chasing what I thought was big. But watching you build what you have, I realized I was chasing shadows. Thank you for showing me what real light looks like." Elena stared at the words, feeling the echo of a life she'd long since let go. She didn't respond, not out of anger, but because there was nothing left to say. Brooke's regret wasn't her burden. It never had been. Instead, she drove to the cemetery, Bella still asleep at home, and sat by her father's headstone with a single yellow rose. 20 years, Papa, and I'm still finding pieces of you in everything I do. The way Bella laughs when she solves a problem, the way the women in our program stand taller when they realize they're enough, the way that Jake's finally learning to be a man you might have respected. You didn't just give me money, you gave me a map for how to live. The wind stirred, carrying the faint scent of motor oil, and Elena smiled through tears that felt like home. Back at the house, Bella was up making pancakes in the shape of hearts, just like Carla's used to. They ate together, laughing over old stories, planning the next training center in Nairobi. And as the sun climbed higher, painting the kitchen gold, Elena felt the truth settle deeper than ever. Her father's love hadn't just protected her from the people who left. It had taught her how to love the world without losing herself, how to fix what was broken without breaking in the process. The story wasn't about the billions or the betrayal or even the quiet justice of watching Jake and Brooke unravel in their own choices. It was about a mechanic who chose love over luxury, who hid a fortune to raise a daughter who'd never doubt her worth, who trusted her to take the pieces of a shattered life and build an empire of repair. Elena Reyes lived that story every day, not as a billionaire or a philanthropist or a survivor, but as a daughter who carried her father's heart in every choice she made. And as Bella and Elena headed back to the garage, tools in hand, ready to rebuild whatever came next, she knew Carlos was watching, his quiet smile saying what it always had: "You are never alone. You are never poor. You are never powerless. I made sure of that." And she was making sure of it too. For Bella, for the women they helped, for the world her father believed could be better if you loved it enough to fix it one life at a time. That was the legacy. That was the fortune. That was the love that lasted forever. 25 years after the lockbox changed everything, Elena Reyes turned 53 in the quiet way she did most things. No fanfare, no gala, just a small gathering at the original Willow Creek Training Center with Bella, a handful of longtime staff, and a few of the very first graduates who now ran centers of their own. The silver in her hair had won completely, worn loose and long like a badge of every battle fought and won, her hands more scarred from decades of teaching than from any single day in the old shop, her eyes carrying a depth that made strangers trust her on sight and old friends lean in closer when she spoke. The Carlos Reyes Foundation had grown into something no one, not even Elena in her wildest dreams, could have predicted. $21.3 billion in assets, operations in 89 countries, over 500,000 women trained in skilled trades worldwide. Entire economies shifted in rural regions where foundation graduates opened shops, factories, and renewable energy cooperatives. They had pioneered global standards for gender equity in technical fields, influenced policy in dozens of nations, and quietly erased billions in predatory debt for families facing medical crises, the same kind that had taken Carlos. Elena's face had appeared on currency in one small African nation as a tribute, but she still answered the phone herself at the Willow Creek Center and still taught the beginner diagnostics class every spring because she refused to forget where it all started. Bella, now 31, had become a legend in her own right. Reyes Innovations was valued at $47 billion after going public the year before, her conversion kits installed in over 12 million vehicles worldwide, slashing carbon emissions by an amount climate scientists called transformative. She'd been named to every major power list, advised presidents and prime ministers, but lived in a modest loft in Detroit near the flagship center, drove an electrified 1970s pickup she and her mother had rebuilt together, and spent half her time in the field installing kits in refugee camps and remote villages. She was unmarried by choice, fiercely protective of her time, and carried her grandfather's quiet smile in a way that made Elena's heart ache with recognition. The 25th anniversary event wasn't public, just family, in the truest sense of the word. They gathered in the original bay where Elena had once pried up floorboards to find her father's secret, now restored exactly as it had been, tools hanging in the same places, the ancient compressor still humming in the corner. A single long table was set with simple food, tamales, pancakes shaped like hearts, yellow roses in mason jars, and they told stories late into the night. The graduate who'd escaped domestic violence and now owned a fleet of mobile repair vans, the teenager who'd arrived pregnant and homeless and just earned her master electrician certification, the village in Guatemala where foundation-trained women had brought electricity for the first time using Bella's kits. Elena listened more than she spoke, watching faces lit by string lights, feeling her father in every laugh, every tear, every quiet nod of understanding. Jake arrived near the end, invited because Bella had insisted. He was family too, in the complicated way time and effort make possible. At 58, he was thinner, weathered in the best way, running the nonprofit car refurbishment program full-time now, having turned it into a national model. Sarah had passed 2 years earlier from breast cancer, and the grief had softened him further, stripped away the last traces of the ambitious young man who'd once valued flash over substance. He brought a small wooden plaque he'd carved himself, a simple wrench crossed with a rose, the words "Fix What Matters" burned beneath. He handed it to Elena without ceremony. "For the wall," he said. "I've been carrying the wood in my shop for years. Finally got it right." Elena turned it over in her hands, tracing the careful lines. "It's perfect." They hung it together above the workbench where Carlos used to stand, Jake on a stool because his back wasn't what it used to be, Elena steadying the level. When it was straight, they stepped back, and for a moment the bay was silent except for the hum of the compressor. "He'd have liked this," Jake said quietly, "knowing we all ended up here, together." Elena nodded, throat tight. He always knew. Later, when most guests had gone home and Bella was cleaning up with the others, Elena and Jake sat on the old stools by the compressor, the same ones she and her father had shared countless evenings. The silence between them was comfortable now, earned. "I used to think the worst thing I ever did was leave you," Jake said finally, voice low. "But watching what you built, what Bella's doing, I realized the worst thing would have been staying when I didn't know how to love you right. You needed space to become this, and I needed to lose everything to learn how to be a man worth knowing." Elena looked at him, saw the truth in his eyes. No self-pity, just clarity. "You got there," she said simply. "That matters." He smiled, small and real. "I see him in Bella every day, the way she thinks 3 steps ahead on a problem, the way she treats people like they're already capable. And I see you in her too, the fire, the refusal to let anyone stay broken if she can fix it." Elena felt tears rise, not sad ones. "We did okay, didn't we?" "Better than okay." He stood, offered his hand to help her down from the stool, even though she didn't need it. She took it anyway. Outside, the night was cold and clear, stars sharp over Willow Creek. Bella joined them, linking arms with both parents, and for a moment they stood there, 3 people bound by choices good and bad, by love that had survived betrayal and time. Jake left first, waving from his sensible sedan. Bella hugged her mother tight. "You tired?" "Bone tired. Good tired." They locked the center, set the alarm, and drove home in the old pickup, heat cranked high, Vicente Fernandez on the radio. At the house, Bella went straight to bed, but Elena lingered in the garage, opening the lockbox one more time. The letter was fragile now, edges soft from years of handling, but the words were as sharp as ever. She read them by flashlight, whispering them like prayer. "You are never alone. You are never poor. You are never powerless. I made sure of that." She folded it carefully, placed it back, and pulled out something new, a second envelope she'd added years ago, her own handwriting on the front. "For Bella, when she's ready." Inside was her own letter, written the night Bella turned 18, full of truths about love and loss, about choosing character over comfort, about the day her heart broke and how it taught her to build instead of burn. She hadn't given it to Bella yet. Some truths need time to ripen, but tonight felt close. Dawn was painting the sky when Elena finally went inside, brewed coffee in Carlos's old mug, and sat on the porch as the world woke up. Bella joined her an hour later, hair wild, bringing 2 plates of heart-shaped pancakes. They ate in silence, watching frost melt off the fields. 25 years, Bella said, "since you found the box." Elena nodded. "Feels like yesterday and forever ago all at once." Bella leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "I'm glad it happened the way it did. The hurt, the leaving, all of it, because it made us who we are." Elena kissed her forehead. "Your abuelo used to say the people who leave you do you the biggest favor of your life. They make room for who you're meant to become." Bella smiled. He was right. They sat until the sun was fully up, warm on their faces, the world stretching out full of engines to fix and lives to repair. And somewhere in the quiet certainty that lives beyond time, Carlos Esteban Reyes watched his daughter and granddaughter carry everything he'd ever hoped for into another day. Not the money, not the patents, not even the foundation's billions, but the unbreakable truth that love, real love, the kind that protects and provides and believes in you when you can't believe in yourself, is the only fortune that never runs out. Elena Reyes lived that truth every single day, grease under her nails, heart wide open, proving over and over that the greatest inheritance isn't what you're given, it's what you choose to do with what you're given, even when it's heartbreak, especially when it's heartbreak, because that's when the real building begins. And 25 years later, the building was still going strong. One life, one lesson, one repaired heart at a time, forever.